Hi, Costin. How are you doing?
Greetings, how are you? I'm fine.
Thank you very much for agreeing to this quick video chat.
Yeah, anytime.
Uh, I want to talk to you about the latest viruses and the latest malware threats. Is it the case that malware writers today have achieved a level of sophistication and their products are such that by using hardcore, strong cryptography, uh, they made the malware mathematically impossible to decipher?
Most of the malware nowadays is obfuscated in some way or another. So that makes it very, very hard not to crack. Um, Analyzing the malware is extremely complicated because first you have to get rid of all these layers of obfuscation. And I'm calling it obfuscation and not encryption because sometimes it's not real encryption involved, like mathematical encryption, but it's just a heavy obfuscation of the code which is designed to run on the processor. So the first side of this question is that the malware nowadays is very heavily obfuscated, so that makes it very, very hard to analyze. However, what you need to keep in mind is that eventually every piece of malware needs to execute on the machine. So that means that the logic to decrypt itself must be present in the malware. So that means that from a mathematical point of view, we will always have access to the final code which is being executed on the computer, giving us a chance to understand what is the purpose of that malware and to break it apart. Of course, that can be very, very, very complicated. And in the case of the Conficker worm, uh, I think that at the moment there is no such thing as a single entity in the world which claims to understand everything about it, probably except for the authors, of course.
That it is going to strike on April the 1st.
Yes.
Now we are recording this just a few days before. It's March 25th. So in less than a week, Conficker will do something. So you have the additional pressure of time. What can be done to minimize the effects of Conficker, which are as of now unknown?
Is that there are three different main versions of this malware out there, and the one that was heavily widespread was the B version. And what happened is that all these variants they have a built-in logic to update themselves, and the logic to update themselves is based on an algorithm which generates random domain names. Um, every day a different set of random domains is checked for updates for this worm. So in the case of Conficker.c, which is the one which will so-called strike on April 1st, this worm generates 500 different domain names a day, which it selects from a list of possible 50,000 domains. And the way the logic is implemented right now is that every piece of the worm, every instance of the worm generates a different set of 500 domains. So what it means here is that if the author of the worm will register a distribution point for an update for this worm, which can be anything, it can launch a denial of service attack against the White House, or it can do pretty much anything on your machine. But the idea is that the probability for an infected computer to launch this attack is roughly 1 in 100. So that, in my opinion, that kind of limits the amount of damage that can be done, because some people estimate the total number of infected machines to 10 million computers. And if out of those only 1% so-called activate on April the 1st, that's still a lot less than 10 million computers doing something. So this is kind of maybe drawback or bug in the malicious code.
If I'm not
limits.
mistaken, the authors of Conficker have been updating the code and incorporating new discoveries, even new mathematical, scientific, or algorithmic discoveries very, very quickly in the code. So they must be looking out for ways of making the worm better, whatever their goals could be. What is your estimate? Conficker could be something as simple as an April Fool's joke, so doing nothing, just waving hello, or it could be something extremely destructive. What is your estimation currently?
Of course, we can only speculate. There is no way to know exactly, but based on previous experience, like what happened with other worms, first of all, I suspect, well, the worm doesn't really activate on April the 1st. What it does, it activates after April the 1st, so starting with April the 1st. So it's up to the authors of this worm to deploy the payload anytime after that date. So first of all, it is my suspicion that they are not going to deploy it on April the 1st exactly, but maybe a bit later, a couple of days later. Because something similar happened in the past with other malware which had similar activation. It didn't really activate on April the 1st, it activated a bit later. So first of all, I'm not so sure that it will actually strike havoc on April the 1st. Probably nothing will happen on April the 1st, and it will activate on April the 4th or the 5th. This is the first thing. And the second thing is that there was a major shift in the design of this malware with the C version of the worm, which is that it doesn't have the ability to replicate anymore. So the first version was able to replicate, the second version was able to replicate, the third version doesn't replicate. It only downloads an update of itself. So what I expect that the next version will again be able to replicate. And that will be the first thing. And the second thing is that the authors of this malware will probably attempt to transform all these infected systems into some way of money making. So I suspect that the next update, the D update, which will be deployed after April the 1st, will include some way of making money. Not sure how. Maybe sending spam, maybe a DOS attack. Most likely I can say that maybe 99% it will not destroy anything, because if you destroy things you can't make money. So if you invest a lot of time and resources into developing this thing, and it's really like a huge effort which was put into developing it, I seriously don't think that somebody who is such sophisticated would do it in order to destroy data. More likely they do it for money.
Okay, so thank you very much, Costin. I agreed with you that we will meet again and record another conversation after Conficker revealed itself. So let's hope that the internet will indeed exist and that we will be able to do our next conversation in about a week or 10 days then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you too. Bye bye.